Hey everybody, welcome back to Up the Vibe. And today I'm joined by Reverend Lois Gueret, who is a medium, minister, spiritual teacher, and UFO experiencer, and is the author of the book, Oh Fuck You, You Mean There's More? Great title.
It is. It's a very catchy title.
Yeah. I must say the expletive in there is spelled F#% K, if everyone needs
Correct.
to search it.
So. Yeah, well, I wanted people to be able to have it in their house with young children and not be worried that they were going to be running around.
It wasn't a publisher request or anything like that.
Oh, no, actually, no one from that direction has said anything to me about the title.
Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and tell us a bit more about the book.
Sure. Like you said, I'm a spirit medium and a minister. I did a metaphysical bachelor's degree so that I could become a reverend. Mostly I'm a rescue medium, and that means that I do work with paranormal consultation and helping people with their supernatural experiences. I'm a spirit medium, but I don't practice doing readings anymore. I've retired from that. I had been doing it for so long that at a certain point I went, there's more that I have to offer rather than, I'd rather teach people how to do it themselves rather than them hiring me to do it for them, is what it came down to. Okay. The book, I bounced the idea around for a lot of years. And something that not too many people know is that I had two false starts. And when we were in Newfoundland, Canada, for my husband's job, I had those two false starts there, and I was trying to figure out a way to compile them. And I ended up just throwing them out and starting all over again from scratch. So the book started in 2016, and we were in Newfoundland for 2 years. So I wrote the bulk of it there, and then I finished it when we came back to BC. And then it took a long time to publish, which is a whole other story, all in of its own. It was me wanting to give my philosophies, my teaching, my guidance to a broader audience than just the people I encountered directly in BC. I wanted to branch out, you might say.
And tell us a bit more about what the book is about.
Well, it really is an intrepid guide to spiritual evolution. I go through everything from the debate on the divine feminine and divine masculine, understanding fourth dimensional energies. I touch on geomancy and alchemy, which is part of the rescue mediumship and the area work that I do. I talk about shadow technology because it's very prevalent and topical at this time in our evolution. And I also include a chapter on my experiences with the extraterrestrial intelligence. And I do quite a bit of connection to Stephen Greer. And then I go on to, I have quite a few eclectic friends. My daughter calls them hippies. She's a younger generation, obviously. And they have what I consider to be expert advice. And that includes Celia Hatch. So I did a chapter, a quite long chapter, where I asked three of my friends, Don Elzer, who does the Wildcraft Forest in Lummi, BC, close to him, his neighbor, Dr. Victoria Willard, because she got her doctorate this year. And I asked Celia Hatch to come in and talk about the connection between sustainability and spiritual evolution, because I think the two of them go hand in hand. So they gave me, I did interviews, I transcribed them. It's a really interesting read. And then after that, I talked about empathy. So there is a common thread through it, which is spiritual evolution. It's understanding where we came from as far as spirit and energy beings, our connection to universal consciousness, and what it is that we're here to do during this generation with the cooperation of Mother Gaia, or planet Earth.
And where have you get most of your inspiration for the book in terms of a lot of these deep concepts?
Well, because I've been practicing so long, since I started this when I was 17, is when I entered the metaphysical community. And I've had various different mentors and studied various different modalities and philosophies over that time. So there's that part of it. There's the educational, learned side, but the majority of the information that I have or that I get these days is from my spirit guides and also my star family. So I'm in communication with extraterrestrial intelligence a lot.
Okay. And what was your earliest memories of this ET contact?
Oh my goodness. My earliest memory is when I was 3. I have a memory of having a visit. I guess I was on board a craft. So a visitation, I was on board a craft with these very tall humanoid beings. And I was myself, the 3-year-old little self, looking up at everything. So I have this visual memory of looking up at them, looking up at the control panels and the navigation area of the craft that we were on, and feeling very connected and very loved, like there was something beyond my earth physical or spiritual aspect that connected me to this particular group of extraterrestrials.
I'm struggling to think how of memories that I had when I was 3. So how vivid is it in terms of from that age?
It's very, very vivid. It's a very small, so it's just so if you were, it would say it's just a snapshot, and then with the snapshot comes this feeling of connectiveness. But it's, you know, how you perceive the world when you're that young as being from your perspective, everything is up. That's what it was like. The surfaces were very with the snapshot, the surfaces are very clean, streamlined. There isn't anything that is, you know, like we would see in our environment. There was no nuts and bolts or screens or screws or rivets or anything like that. It was all just very clean, straight edges.
So what do you remember about the tall beings? What did they look like?
They were very Aryan looking. And that's my first memory of seeing that group of beings, but it persisted right up until my 30s that I had contact with that particular group. So by Aryan, do you know what I mean?
You mean like
so
blonde, blue eyes?
Very not Nordic, blonde hair, blue-eyed beings. Yeah.
And when was it that you figured out that this wasn't just a dream or something? Was it later in life, or kind of did you?
Not until I was like 17 or so.
Okay.
I worked with my first mentor. His name was Frank Vassell. I don't even know if he's still around. And he helped me unlock a lot of understanding about things that had happened to me up till that point. Because he was the one who told me, or at least helped me connect with the fact that I was a rescue medium, because I didn't understand. And a lot of the things that I was experiencing or interacting with were not the mainstream medium type of things. So I don't know if you need any more information than that, but I can.
Well, whatever you care to elaborate on, because obviously there may be some sensitive areas that is there. Or
so a lot of mediums connect with spirit. I was connecting with environmental things. So I would see and be able to communicate with things that were going on in a forest. If I was in the city and there was something going on that wasn't exactly above board, I would be able to feel that and sense it. It was like an empathic ability, but it was directed towards this needs to be helped. There's support that you can give to make this situation better. Does that make any sense?
A little bit. Sounds like a bit of a sort of maybe a clairvoyance or Claire, one of the Claires possibly in
Yeah, it
there.
is a Claire ability. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So the Claire abilities apply when you're talking about mediumship too. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so what made you at the age of 17 then approach this person? Was there certain events that made you feel I need to figure this out?
I was my dad had bought a house in a place called Mission, BC. And at that time, my parents were in the process of being separated and divorced. And in order for him to get things fixed up, I was volunteering to live in there and look after the place. But the experiences that started to happen to me when I moved in there were beyond anything that I'd ever had happen before.
Sort of paranormal.
Oh, it was amazingly paranormal.
Okay.
And it was the first time I could, as a teenager, say that I had things going on that were disturbing and frightening.
Okay.
I had this being that we used to walk the house every night while I was trying to go to sleep, which would wake me up, and he'd be standing. I couldn't see him just clairvoyantly or with my psychic abilities. I was seeing him with my physical eyes too, as this shadow, very tall,
Sort of shadow
7-foot
being.
tall being. It was a humanoid form. So it was somebody who had a life on this planet and then died and was somehow associated with the house.
So you got to know a bit more about this presence.
I never got to know the exact story. So what happened, and I'm sure that if I was to go back and take a look at it now, I'd probably be able to figure out all the pieces, but I was happy with what happened eventually, which was finding this mentor I had. He went through the process of doing a house clearing with me for the first time.
Okay.
And putting all that to rest, and everything changed after that. When
Did
he
you
did
do
the house clearing,
QHHT or anything? Any sort of?
Pardon me?
Did you do any QHHT or anything of that nature in terms of going back hypnosis or anything?
No, he didn't. No. It was purely remote viewing, and then learning how to take that information that you got through remote viewing and apply it to creating a solution.
Okay, so he did the remote viewing.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Because I had no idea what
what
I was doing. Yeah, and I was way too affected at that point.
Sure.
To be an effective agent to correction. Yeah.
Sounds like it's still tough now just talking about it.
At that time, yeah, it was very tough. When that being was walking around, like I used to hear him start in the basement, which was completely empty. He'd come up the stairs and he'd wander around the house, and you could feel and hear somebody walking. I used to cover my head with my blanket and sing at the top of my lungs that Beatles song, "All You Need Is Love." And that's how I'd be able to get my energy back to, I'm not so frightened anymore, and I can go back to sleep.
Okay.
But yeah, it was, and that lasted probably about 2.5 to 3 weeks that I was, from the moment I moved in till we got a solution in place.
Do you talk about these experiences in your book at all?
Not that particular one, no. But I do talk, I add a lot of my personal experiences to the book. That was difficult because I really outed myself. Because friends and family are reading this that didn't know anything about these experiences. Which is always difficult, right? We used to call it coming out of the spiritual closet.
Yeah. And you mentioned your family. I guess they didn't have the same, there's no history in the family in terms of these things?
There is, yes. There's a very deep history. As far as I know, it goes beyond my grandparents' generation on both sides, but the stories that I know are from my grandparents. In particular, in 2017, I got to spend a month in the Winnipeg, Manitoba area of Canada, and I got to visit with my cousins, and then I learned that my grandmother, who was very, very Roman Catholic, so by that I mean she went to church twice a week. She did the Tuesday service and the Sunday service.
Okay.
She worked with the priests, and I actually learned that she had also been one of the people called during exorcisms. I didn't know that before, and that she was in contact with spirit quite often. She would tell the rest of the family if someone had passed away before they even got notice of it. She'd know. So, and then my dad raised us on stories of the supernatural, things that had happened to him. And in addition to that, he was also an experiencer that had some really, he had good recall on things that had happened that he was able to tell me about.
Okay. So what kind of experiences did you hear about from your father?
For the extraterrestrial contact,
Yeah.
There's two that stick out in my mind. When I was about 10, we had a cabin at the northern end of Pitt Lake. It's boat access only, and we were up there.
Is this BC?
This is in BC, yes. Yeah. So we were up there during the summer quite often for the entire summer holiday. During one of those summers, I woke up because they were busy cooking breakfast at an unusual hour. It was just getting light out. So in the summer, it's probably about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And I came out of bed and I said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "Oh, well, we were woken up about 2:30, 3 o'clock this morning, and there was a UFO outside in the middle of the bay, so we were watching it." And I said, "Well, why didn't you guys get me up?" "I don't know." Which I now know as an adult is common. Yeah. There's some sort of mesmerizing thing that happens at the same time. And apparently they had watched it till it started to get light out, and then it took off. And yeah, they were making breakfast and getting their coffee and everything at that time in the morning. So that's the thing that sticks out in my mind is, like, I really wish they had gotten me up. I would have liked to see it too, but I would also, they're both dead at this point. I would also have liked to have heard more of the story. Like, it would have been interesting to have the two of them hypnotized so they could tell me what happened during that time, because nobody's going to sit there for that long. So supposedly 2 to 2.5 hours they were sitting there just looking at an object. I don't think that's, there's something else going on there. There's more to that story.
Sure.
And then the other one was my dad was an alcoholic. So when he was really into his addiction, he used to take one of the smaller boats, which was just an aluminum with an outboard motor on the back. And he would go up to the cabin by himself. This is after he had retired, so he had the free time. And during one of those trips, he was coming back, and here's his tale as told to me a couple of days after he got back from this adventure. He said the motor all of a sudden stalled, and it was getting dark. He was upset at himself for leaving his departure for so long, so that he was in this situation. He couldn't get the motor going, so he decided he was going to start to row, because rowing, it probably would have taken him about an hour to get to where there was a boat launch, and then he could have got out of the boat. the boat itself would not move. So he was rowing and rowing, and the boat's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I know the area he's talking about. It was not shallow water or anything like that that was holding him back. There was some sort of otherworldly force going on. And then he says that he remembers waking up. He was laying in the bottom of the boat. He woke up. It's daylight out. It's the next morning. He's in the exact same spot. And he decides, well, I'm going to try and start the motor again. The motor started first pull, and he got home. So as he was going home, he was trying to figure out, well, what happened between me realizing the boat wasn't moving and me waking up the next morning.
Mm.
And the conclusion he came to was that he was taken. The boat, everything was taken aboard a craft. And he was told to stop drinking.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And he never touched a drop of alcohol after that. So he went from being a really, really toxic, addicted alcoholic who was very dysfunctional to, by the time he got home, he didn't take another drop of alcohol.
Right. Okay. So I guess with the
there was
story
a
itself,
healing-
it's hard to really say, oh, what's going on here? But that particular aspect to it kind of gives it a lot of weight, I
Yeah,
guess.
gives it a lot of weight, because how could you not have detox symptoms? How could he not want to drink again? But he literally just went, I don't drink anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some sort of healing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that if he had carried on the way that he was at that time, he probably he would not have lived to be 83 like he did.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you mentioned earlier that you were in Newfoundland for a couple of years. Did you have any experience? Yeah. A couple of experiences there?
We did. Newfoundland is the first place that I had daytime experiences. So we were doing, or I was doing CE5 solo when I first started out. And then through social media, I was able to find out that there was like this hidden community in the spiritual paranormal realm. Mm-hmm. Because Newfoundland is a very disciplined place. And you can talk about extraterrestrials, you can talk about mythology like fairy folk and things like that. But if you start to talk about anything on the spiritual realm, it's labeled witchcraft, and you usually end up getting quite a bit of rebuttal. So there's this underground community there that's quite broad and very interesting. So I started to do CE5 contact with a small group of this community in Newfoundland, just to, because they were all interested, and ETs was a safe topic. And during one of those, I had me and two other women, and we did a weekend where we were at one of their cabins. And so we did an entire weekend of meditations, and we didn't restrict it to being just during the nighttime. One of the things that I had planned is a trip to this abandoned property where there is what they call a fairy tree ring. So this is, I believe they're elm trees. Mm-hmm. That have got to be over 100 years old. They were planted in a circle on this abandoned piece of property, and it's very magical. The whole area is just, you can just feel it when you're in there and amongst those trees. And they're so tall that they've come up in this circle, and then competing for space, they've grown outwards. So all the branches looks kind of like the branches have come out and like an umbrella sort of developed in that way. I don't know if that helps. Do you understand
Okay.
what I mean by, can you get a visual from that?
I'm sort of visualizing possibly what you might see on front of a book of a on the front cover of a book or something that kind of
Yes.
I guess something a bit mystical.
Yes. Yes. So we, with this group, on the last day we were there, we took this field trip and we had brought some offerings, because you do that when you're working with like the mythical type of creatures like fairies. We brought some offerings, and we had our little visit. And then on the way back, there was this very large, probably the size of a football field, craft that we spotted on the side of the road up in the air. So it was on the right hand side of the road, way up in the air. And we were watching it and filming it and like talking in an excited voice, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is actually happening. And we were describing it to each other, and like it would just behind trees, and then we get past the trees and we could see it again. I was in the front passenger seat. The other person was driving. And then there was another person behind me who was filming over my left shoulder. And we were both, like visually checking to make sure that the craft was in our cameras, and we were filming away, and it was amazing.
Okay.
So, and then we went past this final set of trees. And when we got past those trees, it wasn't there anymore. So we decided to pull over to calm down, because I don't know if you haven't experienced something like that. It's really hard to explain in words just how much it affects you, how the understanding and the realization that we're not alone is you get so grounded with that. So we pulled over and we were talking about it, trying to calm down, and guess who calls me out of the blue? In the beginning here, you're asking me who I learned from, which was Deb Warren from Okanagan Seaseti. She calls me out of the blue. I answer the phone call, because I'm still like, well, what's the chances of her calling me right at this moment? I said, hello, Deb. And she said, hi, I was told I had to call you. What's going on? So we had this conversation over, because she's really good at guiding you into, okay, so what was this about? Right? What did I just see? What did I just experience? So she was asking us questions on the phone, trying to get more information. And it was basically just what we had experienced was confirmation that, yes, there is life on other planets. Yes, they're here. And that, what I was doing with teaching everybody CE5, that I was teaching at that time, was a good thing. It was so the visualization and the visit was to confirm.
So when was this roughly? In what year was this?
This was in 2017.
Okay. And
yeah,
you said it was the size of a football field.
it was huge. It was quite, so if you were to say in general, it was a triangular shape, but it wasn't just straight angles. The main part of it was straight, and then near the back, it cut in 2 times before it went straight across. I could clearly see, and everybody else could clearly see, that it was streamlined, but it was square on the side. So there was a flat surface on the side, and it was completely flat on the top and the bottom.
Okay. Did you say you got video footage of this?
We did, however, and I've still got it. The only problem is the craft didn't show up. It didn't show up on my camera, and it didn't show up on Ashley's camera, who was filming behind me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bizarre. Was it a normal
very
camera
bizarre.
or infrared?
No, they were just cell phones.
Cell phones, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But you saw it in the visual spectrum. Or at
when
least,
we
was it shadowed?
well, yeah, and we could both see it on our cameras, which is why it was so confusing. So what is the conclusion? Most people say, and Stephen Greer also says this, is that you need to ask permission before getting this type of proof.
Okay.
Now, had we been able to capture that on our cameras on that day, I don't know what would have happened, because that would have been probably too much for anybody to have accepted.
Sure, but we are in this world at the moment where there seems to be UFO videos popping up everywhere, and we wonder if they're CGI and things, and people might say the same thing.
Yeah,
So
might have said the same thing. We might have questioned it too much ourselves, right? Like we may have watched the footage and gone, well, no, that can't really be real. Or there could have been repercussions where, because it's not beyond the realm of possibility, and you'll find this out in my book, that there are groups of people who don't really want this type of information to be common knowledge.
Sure, yeah.
So had it provided proof that people would have accepted, it also would have gone into that category. We would have probably had a visit from the military, and they would have questioned us about it. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why, but I do like to tell the story still, because first of all, always ask permission before you're getting footage of anything. And second of all, really think it through. Do you want to be somebody who discloses this type of information to the public?
And when you got back, and you
that
looked
went
at the
through very carefully, because
so
what we did was, when we after talking to Deb, we drove straight back to this person's cabin, and I had my laptop computer there, and we didn't know that we hadn't caught the footage at that time. So immediately I connected through a cable. I connected it to the laptop and downloaded the video on both of our phones. And then we opened it up to take a look at it, and it was just us talking exciting, and nothing but blue sky and trees.
Okay, that's very strange.
I know.
Did you have doubts then? Did you start to think, oh, maybe something hadn't happened, or were you still sure that it had happened?
Oh, at that time, no, we didn't have doubts. We were just very confused as to why three of us had the exact experience, exact same experience, and we're using the same words to describe what we saw, and then not being able to get it on film. Yeah. So that was the hard part, was going like, okay, well, I think at the time what we all felt was like we failed somehow. We had this amazing opportunity and event happen to us, and we failed because there wasn't any film footage of it. Yeah.
But you weren't really looking for that, though. You were looking for self-confirmation of it. So in some ways you'd succeed to get that.
Oh, well, yes. And it would have been, even though I'm saying you need to think these three things through very clearly so that you understand all the implications, it would have been amazing to have that footage.
Sure.
Absolutely amazing if
How do you do the field work? And is there anything you did on that specific day that you felt had an impact in terms of CE5?
Well, we did a lot of healing work to start with. We did very clear intention. We were doing chanting. So Stephen Greer's mantra that he teaches, the I'm Nama, we were doing that, which is basically, I believe it's Sanskrit for it's connection to your higher vibrational energies.
It's not a puja.
Simple. Pardon me?
It might be. There's a puja on
it could
his
be puja. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But I think it's summarized as being connecting yourself to your higher source, a higher frequency, a higher vibration. We were doing multiple meditations that day and remote viewing at the same time. I do have an audio recording that's interesting somewhere in my archive of files on my external drive where we did a meditation the night before, and they didn't tell me that they were both having slight fears about what would happen. So it was successful for them, but we had all three of us heard footsteps in the house, the cabin, I should say, because it is a cabin. So the living room in this cabin where we were doing the meditation in that night has a glass door that is in between the living room and the kitchen. The glass door was shut. So what we heard was the door opening, and something came in and stopped right at the glass door. Now, because I was doing the meditation, I wasn't deep in an altered state, so I was looking at the door and I couldn't see anything there. When they both came out of it, they talked about the fact that they heard these footsteps, and I went, that's interesting to me because I heard them too. So we checked the audio recording that we had, and you can actually hear the last part of the footsteps coming up to the door, so that we do have an audio recording of that.
Okay, so
But
you were
once again,
recording what you're doing.
Yeah, once again, it doesn't really prove anything, because how simple would it be to imitate footsteps? I
Sure.
mean, yeah. So it's because we had the experience that it means something to us, not necessarily to anybody else. Yeah. And I am somebody who I do push really hard to discredit anything, because if something was to happen, I want to be able to say without a shadow of a doubt that this was an authentic, genuine experience, not just something that we used creative imagination with, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Have you done other C5 events and had similar experiences, or have they been, maybe you've had somewhere nothing's happened? Or
well, there has been a couple that nothing's has really happened of importance. However, when I was doing it with Deb Warren, I did it with Deb Warren from 2011, August 2011, all the way to 2014. So there was a long period of time there where we were doing it monthly. And I have every one of those encounters, I had the same reaction. Okay, that's good enough. I'm good for the rest of the year. If nothing else happens, I'm satisfied with what I just experienced. And then the next month would come and I would say it all over again.
okay.
To note, one of the last ones I did before we went to Newfoundland was in Mara, BC at my house. And it was just me and Deb Warren. And so we were a little bit more loose with our rules. We were doing self-directed meditation rather than guided. And I got the message at that time to look in a particular spot in the sky. So I told her. And she said, okay, well, we'll get up and we're going to look at that spot in the sky. And then nothing was happening, and I was waiting and waiting. And I go, well, maybe Deb, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I was just imagining that one. And then we had I must have lasted close to a minute, where a object that looked like a meteor entering the atmosphere, but it went up on like a 35-degree angle. So it started near the field that we were looking out at, and it went up and then disappeared. So it was the reverse visual of like a falling star, except this was a shooting star. It was going up. And Deb was so excited when she saw that. She was yelling, "That's not a comet, that's a UFO." So she was really excited by that. Then we found out that there was similar sightings that night. One in Edgewood, where a friend of mine had been outside because he smoked at the time. He was outside having a cigarette, and he saw 3 beings walking across the field in the house that he was renting. And then another group of people in Kelowna, BC, So from where I was in Mara to Edgewood to Kelowna, BC was a triangular pattern. So the one in, in Kelowna, BC, I actually saw it on a Facebook feed talking about that they had seen something similar to ours. And then it was, like it looked like a meteor going up.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time. So this all happened within I think it was about 3 hours around when we had our sighting. So there was a lot of activity that particular.
Did you get a description of the beings?
Yeah. They're away, but he said they were tall, gray skinned looking beings, that they were wearing some sort of their arms were longer than that of a human, and they were quite thin and quite tall, so 7 feet plus, and they all looked very similar. So they were almost clone looking, like, yeah.
Okay. And turning to your book for a bit, in terms of what these are, you mentioned a difference between interdimensional beings and extraterrestrials. I don't know if you want to expand on the sort of differences you theorize.
Yes, so it's similar to what you get with Edgar Mitchell and his association, FREE. I think it's just for Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Experiences. I think that's what FREE stands for. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
I've heard of it. I don't know much about it, but I've heard about his foundation. Yeah, Edgar Mitchell's.
So he did a study that basically confirms what I think is reality, that not all these encounters are with an extraterrestrial intelligence. So in the book, I talk about extraterrestrial being something that is off planet, but within our reality or our time frame. So this touches a little bit on the multi-universe theory.
Mm-hmm.
But I term alien as being something that is outside of, it's an encounter with something that exists in our space, but is outside of our perceptions. So that could be outside of our perceptions, could be defined as in a different dimensional reality. Now, I understand that extraterrestrials transdimensionally shift for travel or for when they're interacting with us, so that there's a safety involved, so that they're not attracting attention. So there's that quality too. But I think that a lot of the times there's other beings like celestial or angelic. They were coming up in Edgar Mitchell's study, where people were talking about encounters that were not extraterrestrial, but were also equally valid and beneficial towards the advancement of mankind.
Okay.
So does that make any sense then?
A bit. Where do you fit the paranormal side of things in there?
Okay. So when I do my paranormal consultation, I'm quite often doing a consult. So I want to differentiate myself from investigator, which is someone who looks for empirical proof. So the whole point of doing an investigation is to gain evidence, photographic, audio, video footage, or any of those other ways that they do it, using tri-field meters or those other gadgets. I'd use that as a tool, but not necessarily as the means to an end. When I go in and do paranormal consultations, I'm helping the people learn about their particular situation, how their abilities have led them to this situation, and what they can do on their own to maintain a safer, or especially more private space, because quite often what happens is a sense of intrusion, that they're being, some people would even say violated at a certain level. But yeah, so there's that too. And Dr. Greer is, he's changed over the last couple of years, where he talks about the differentiating categories. So he categorizes things, and he does say that quite often people do confuse paranormal experiences with the contact from extraterrestrial intelligence. It's very easy to do. Yeah. And I do go into the book, I go into it a little bit more to help people understand what it is, so that they can have their own discernment as to what's going on.
So when you talk about extraterrestrials, do you talk about other beings who are living in on other planets? Maybe they're living in third density, fourth, fifth density, or in the astral?
Yes,
or
they can be. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's use some reference points here. One of the communications that I had, that I talk about in the book. So let's back it up a little bit even further. In 2016, I did a series of posts on the group that I had at the time on Facebook, where I did channeled messages every Sunday, and I did it for an entire year. Some of the beings that came through for those channeled messages were extraterrestrial. So there's a very different feel to it. So I'm coming at this from a medium point of view. So my explanations are based in my experience as a medium. When I talk to something that I would call a spirit guide, it's not a telepathic connection. It's a communication that happens on my psychic level. So I'll either hear with psychic ears, or I'll be seeing words that are given to me, or it'll be given to me in pictures, but it comes in, and it's in my third eye is where the communication happens. Or what I actually have my third eye in the middle of my forehead, and I actually have something that I call my psychic ears, which are just at the top near my ears, but behind them.
So how does these sessions start? How do you go about getting these sessions going? These channels?
It's with meditation. Yeah. So I use meditation to enter into what I would call an altered state.
Okay.
So it's not the way that we're communicating right now is awake, very alert, a conscious state. When I do this, I'm in an altered subconscious state, where so I guess my brain waves would be in a different frequency. So that's spirit guide. Then when I was getting information from various different extraterrestrial beings during that year that I was doing channeled information, almost always it was telepathic. And that means that I would sense something was around, and then be able to ask questions and then hear answers on a telepathic level. So for me, telepathic or telepathy it coincides with empathic abilities.
How do you know that you're getting a telepathic message versus just hearing your own voice?
Well, it wasn't me. It wasn't me talking. So it would sound very different. The one that I mainly, and I've talked about this in the book too, I think, not to the full extent, like I did excerpts from the channel material in the book. The one that was so different was a being that told me to call him Eant. So it's EANT. And his sense of humor was completely different than mine. And the whole time that he was communicating with me telepathically. So it's when my spirit guides, it seems like it's information that's coming from a heavenly source. So it would be above me that I sense, and I get this information in my third eye. With him, I would actually see an image of him in front of me, and the telepathic communication was coming from that image, and I was hearing
Okay.
it on a telepathic level. I know it's probably hard for people to understand who haven't had that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he have any pleasantries? Did he say, "Hey, how's it going," or was it straight in?
He was usually straight in, but he was very funny.
Okay.
And at one point he said we were all like little chicks trying to crack out of our eggshell, and then he'd go peep peep, and then he'd laugh.
Okay.
So
Of a childlike
yeah,
humor a little bit.
he had a great childlike humor. He described himself as, let me see if I remember this correctly, David Suzuki crossed with Wayne Dyer. He thought that he was a scholar who was studying humanity at this time on this planet. It wasn't his only field of study, but that's what he was here for, was just to observe and to understand what it was that we were going through at the time. But
Okay.
he had, yeah, when I was hearing him and writing things down, it was not my guides. It came through completely differently. And it was certainly not my sense of humor. It was very nerd-like, but still made me laugh at the same time. Yeah.
Did you take long to get to the point where you could channel, or was this something that you've had all your life? I think you.
Oh, it took a long time. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't somebody that it came naturally to.
Okay.
The project for a year was to actually help me get better at doing it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because some people seem to develop it naturally.
Yes, there's some people who have that as their first ability. But like I said, I'm primarily a rescue medium, which puts me in a different category. But I've been doing this so long that there's other things that have happened. There's other abilities that I've been able to also develop during the course of this. So I started this when I was 17 and I'm 57 now. So it's a long time.
Yeah. And
that's 40 years of doing it. So
yeah.
If I haven't made any progress, I'd have to be, like hitting myself over the head saying, do better.
And how long does it take you to get to, when you start meditating, to that altered state?
It depends on what's going on in my life. And I'm sure this is something that everybody will relate to. Everything has been difficult to do since the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, with all the ruckus that's been going on in the world. And
I imagine it's quite
the
difficult now.
uncertainty. Yeah.
There's a lot going on at the moment.
Yeah, so I have to, and we've also changed. So everybody has gone through some growth on a spiritual level. And we've changed so that things are not exactly the way that they used to be. So there's a lot of stuff, and anybody who has books on this topic, on extraterrestrials or spirituality or the paranormal will relate to this. If you read some of that old stuff that was so valuable to me, like I started reading this stuff when I was in my teen years. So I was reading books from the 70s. So all those books from the 70s, it's really hit and miss as to whether they even apply anymore. Yeah, you can read them and go, yeah, this doesn't work anymore. This is not how this is not what the nature of reality is anymore. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned some time ago on this that you were talking about sustainable living and spiritual growth, and the sort of the connections between the two. I've seen it a little bit about that in your book. I wonder if you could talk a bit about that.
Yes. So this is the connection between me and Celia Hatch, really, because more than anybody else I've talked to in the CE5 community, she has a similar comprehensive understanding as to what I mean when I say there's a connection between sustainability and spiritual evolution. And that also connects into needing to progress to a level 1 civilization so that we can have more contact with what I call our star family or extraterrestrial intelligence. So where to start with that topic? Let me see. Right now, we still think it's okay to damage things. We don't have to pay attention to our footprint and our connection to natural systems. So we still use products, create products that are not disposable, that are not renewable. We withdraw from the planet resources that are irreplaceable, and we do it without consideration or thought as to it being finite. We still hurt each other, right? There's still a big industry geared towards war, and what the research that I've been doing lately talks about them being non-lethal weapons, but they're horrific nonetheless. We're, recently watching in the news what's going on with Ukraine. We still consider nuclear or the use of radioactive material to be a good thing to invest in. There's all these things that fall in the category of not being sustainable or not creating a sustainable world. My friend Don Elster talks about it this way. He says that he doesn't like sustainable because you could have a perpetual motion machine that's called sustainable, or you could have an economic system that's called sustainable. So he doesn't really attach the word sustainable to the environment. He talks about regenerative, restorative. And he also talks about we need to stop thinking short term and we need to start thinking long term. We need to be in this for the long game. Now, not just what our grandchildren inherit, but we're talking about generations anywhere from 100 to 500 years from now. We should be thinking about that now so that we can make appropriate changes. When you look at things from a purely scientific point of view, there's lots of fatalistic thought that we have physically gone beyond repair or restoration. People like David Suzuki talk about giving up. Just enjoy the time that you got left because it's, we've gone beyond anything that we can fix. But if you apply a spiritual outlook towards the science and you connect into it that way, that's where spiritual evolution comes into play and makes sustainability an achievable goal again. We can get there if we change the way that we think about each other. If we change the way that we look at the world, we can get back there again to living in a world that is regenerative and restorative, and that we're not depleting things anymore because we're aware of a bigger picture, that there's something beyond us, that there is whether it is an extraterrestrial intelligence or whether it's a spiritual realm, there's something above us and beyond us that we also need to be aware of and tuned into when we're doing things in the physical. So that's why I brought it up in the book, was from that perspective, that there's a bigger picture here, and we need to stop thinking beyond the moment and think long term, be in it for the long game.
What do you think, if there are any problems with the current sort of green revolution, where a lot of the world has gone in terms of trying to restore the planet? Do you think there are any problems in that? Any sort of myths
Well, there's out
or?
there overused.
Mhm,
Yeah, and I think green is, when they talk about green technology or the green movement, you do need to be careful of that. Excuse me. Yeah. So here's a good example. We talk about wanting to do, uh, you know, electric cars, yet the cost environmentally of constructing those cars is still really high. So the construction is not green.
mhm,
The product used in the construction of electric cars is not green. So those batteries are awful. They won't go anywhere. We're going to have landfill problems with the batteries from those vehicles. Then you're plugging it in
mhm,
to, so you've gotten rid of gas, but you're plugging it into dirty electricity most of the
mhm,
time.
mhm,
Where's the electricity that's charging up those batteries? Where's it coming from?
mhm,
So we're buying into, there is alternatives to this, but we're buying into this narrative because it's making somebody money. And there's a lot of people who are, and even more so these days, going to electric cars because they think that's a solution. And then windmills, well, there's a whole bunch of problems with windmills. Solar panels are also very dirty,
mhm,
because what do you do with the product when it's no longer working? And all the materials were made using electricity. So we need, and Dr. Greer talks about this, we need an energy source that is not depleting our resources and that is not making a bunch of people a whole
mhm.
whack of money.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought that there are free energy sources out there that are being
Yeah,
withheld, and
withheld. Yeah, yeah.
I guess that would be quite
So
useful right now.
the original definition of a level one society was, or there's three levels of society or civilization, and all three of those are based on the source of energy used in the society. So a level one civilization has an energy source that does not deplete or create um, uh, a byproduct that is not
Mhm.
um, good for the environment.
Yeah.
And we have, excuse me, tickle in my throat. We have enough funds to do exploration on this if we'd stop putting the budget into non-lethal weapons,
Sure. Yeah.
for instance. Or, like, okay, so Bezos, Elon Musk,
Mhm.
and who's the other guy? I think his first name is Greg. Okay, we're all doing this great philanthropy. They say that they're making a better world for us by using their money towards uh, the different things that they envision. Why not use that money to figure out some of the big problems like energy?
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting to know whether we need to sort ourselves out first before we're given the tools a little bit to kind of prove ourselves.
Oh yeah, I 100% believe that
Mm,
why would they give us anything if we're still hurting ourselves and hurting the
exactly. Yeah.
planet and creating systems that are not restorative and that are damaging, and that, we've only got um, a limited amount of time. Say, for example, we were to have a solar event that would take out the electronics on this planet.
Mhm.
We would fall into chaos awfully quickly. We would degress as a
Mhm.
civilization awfully quickly. And these are things that have been talked about. There's studies and understanding our relationship to the sun and how solar flares, how often they happen. There's a YouTube video channel out there called Suspicious Observers, and he goes into this in detail, how we could be facing an apocalyptic event in our near future if we're not paying attention to.
Yeah, I've heard a lot from David Wilcock on the Great Solar Flash theory,
yes.
and he's shown that there was a solar flash in our nearest star, Proxima Centauri, and
Yes.
years ago, I think was it 2012. So these things do seem to happen in space. Whether it happens to our sun, I don't know, but yeah, it's an interesting idea. It doesn't sound great. But he talks about those that have ascended won't experience it. I'm not sure.
Well, I think that if you took that as a practical level and you said that we spent time, so I talk about this, I don't talk about this in the book, but I talk about this more recently, that if we spent time promoting knowledge and supporting our children and our grandchildren's generation on developing intellectually, that we would be better set up if there was an event that was to happen. We would have the knowledge or the intelligence to know how to change things, or we would have things set up beforehand so that we were better prepared, if that makes any sense. I don't think that, so herbalists and people in the pagan and Wiccan community talk about this, that the things that you need will show up in your environment. So if you're paying attention and you have gotten your knowledge, you'll know how to use those things in a way that will, when you need them in the future. And I think that applies to the bigger scale with the planet. If we were paying attention, we would, and I know that it's possibly not common knowledge yet, because people are waiting for some big disclosure event. We want the government to tell us that UFOs are real instead of going by our own experiences. But I do know that technology has been given freely to the elected officials globally, and it has not gotten to the public. I know that, like you were saying, there's information that's been withheld. We were supposed to be at the Jetsons when in 1950s, not, and here we are in 2022, and we still have so many things that are antiquated, so many things that are behind the times that didn't progress.
It is something I pondered in terms of, was that due to nefarious activity, or was that to a certain extent because we weren't ready, or a bit of both? It's hard to understand. I mean, I do know that there has been a lot of secrecy. The UFO cover-up is, well, it's massive, and it doesn't sound good at all. But you wonder, when in this kind of bizarre world we live in, that maybe there's a hidden intention or a layer behind that that's saying, well, they're not ready yet, they're too warlike, we need to allow them this technology when they're going to be able to, not be a threat to us. Yes.
And so we go back to the energy source issue. Yeah, I don't know, are you a Star Trek fan?
I have watched some of the more recent ones, actually. Yeah, sort of just Star Trek Discovery and stuff, but the sort of the Jean-Luc Picard and those ones. Yeah,
those are great. Yes. So in Star Trek Next Generation, they had a movie that was about first contact. It was either a movie or a season finale. I think it was a movie. Anyways, they talked about the first contact moment being associated with the civilization developing sustainable technology that would take them off planet. So in the narrative with Star Trek, that is the warp drive capability.
Mhm.
And the discovery of dilithium crystals, I believe. So we have yet to even think in that direction. We're still using fossil fuels to launch rockets
Yeah.
into space. And that, yeah, so we're a long ways away from where we need to be.
Mhm.
But so once again, if we were to say, okay, wait a minute, everybody take pause and think this through, instead of having an education system that restrains knowledge, if we were to go back to, let's develop our intellect as a priority.
Mhm.
Let's allow the next, or the generations that are coming up, to design new systems of education and to go in fields of study that are relevant for today's world rather than the old ones. Catherine Austin Fitz talks about this. She talks about it a couple times in the last quarterly wrap-ups, where she says that, did you know that intellectually they were degressing intellectually because of the focus in on technology and the various different means that we have become dependent on, that are creating problems with development with children. So we're not focused in on proper food. We're focused in on class when it comes to economics. So there's people out there that really don't have enough food to eat and can't develop intellectually because of that. Why is this still going on? Anyways, to wrap that all up, it comes back again to if you were able to approach this on a spiritual level, all of these things are tied together. Our contact with our star family, our developing ourselves into a civilization that is ready and capable of handling that interaction, and everything else, our political systems that are all currently going through change and evolution. It's all tied together. So if we were able to come back to a spiritual base again, and recognize that there's something else out there beyond our perceptions at times that is bigger than us, and there is an end game, there is a goal. We're supposed to be here doing something, not just playing with our phones. So yeah.
How do you see the next few years playing out?
I think that 2022 and 2023 are going to be probably a lot similar to the last 2 years, unfortunately. That we're still in the midst of change. There's a saying out there that discontent begets change. So if we were all comfortable and happy with what's going on, we wouldn't be going through the change that we're going through. On a philosophical or spiritual level, I believe that we're all connected, that I'm in more control than I think I am. So what I see going on out in the world is not an opposing force or something evil. It's myself on some level having an experience. So I have more control than I think I do at times. So 2022 and 2023 are going to be the years where we do some corrections. It's going to happen fast. I since the beginning of the year, I have seen several things happen that give me hope. I don't feel despaired because I know that we've got another 2 years to go through this stuff, I actually see the end of the 2021 being the crest of the mountain, and we're down the other side. But it's still going to be intense. This is okay. So my guides, especially my star family, tell me that this is not just happening on planet Earth, that our galaxy is also going through a change, and our galaxy is also evolving. So that we're a reflection of each other. So that's the micro and the macro again. Yeah, so I do have hope. I know that there's a lot of people out there who are in the right zone, are thinking things through, are paying attention to what's going on. I don't know that we're going to have a big disclosure event like we all want, because we all want some spacecraft to land somewhere and go out and give us definitive proof that, oh, there is really life on another planet. I don't know that that's going to happen. I think that we're going to gradually get to that point. It won't be one definitive. And it'll happen. I don't think it'll be the government. I think it'll be, like they've said in other countries around the world, it'll be a group of school-age children who say, hey, we just had an encounter. We're out in the playground and this ship landed and they talked to us, and here's the message that they have to say. I think it's going to happen that way more than it will happen with our, like the president of the United States saying that he's been on board a craft or something.
Yeah, and I've asked this quite a few times in terms of, and I guess you've answered it in a way, but I think I see disclosure coming from the ground up rather than from the top down. I think you've kind of said that, yeah. And
yeah,
CE5
100%.
is a part of that, yeah.
CE5 is a part of that, yeah. Yes, yeah. My friend Don Elzer, who has the Wildcraft Forest in Lumby, BC, he says that he has a vision of the planet communicating with us en masse. We all wake up one morning and we've had this dream, this encounter with the orb that we live on, and that it's undisputable. So it's outside of any mainstream religion. And we all know from that moment forward that we have to, put our feet on, or put our shoes on one foot at a time, and get back to basics and get back to being in line with natural systems rather than the artificial world that we seem to want to go towards.
I wonder when we get mainstream media and the government sort of talking about this, that we're kind of like, yeah, we know that. It's not a surprise, It's kind of
Yes, I don't know that they ever will. I think that I don't know if you pay attention to the new terms, but the mainstream media now is being called legacy media.
Yeah,
and the people like you and me, people like you and me are being called the new media. And I would like to see us go back to an Edward R. Murrow version of journalism, where that it was just reporting, that you didn't have an opinion involved. If journalists could just go back to that, so that we could get the information and make the opinion ourselves, then we'd be better off.
Yeah.
Right now we're being told, here's the information, but here's how you get to think about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
it's not just that, it's also, this is something you don't need to know as well. Lots hidden.
Exactly. The censorship is unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, that's been amazing to hear all your stories and about your book and everything. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about where people can get hold of you. I know you've got a website as well, right?
Yes. So it's West Coast Enlightenment, all one word, .com. And you can find the book called Oh Fuck You Mean There's More, an Intrepid Guide to Spiritual Evolution on Friesen Press.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully we might get to speak again sometime, but
and I think I went way over our time allowance, but you can edit it out if you need to.
Of course. These are freeform and always good to hear as much as I can, really, and get as much context. That's fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.